It's time to take your business to the next level, the boss level. These are the premier business owner strategies and successes being utilized by the industry's top talent today. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss. Now let's welcome your host, Ann Ganguza.
Hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ann Ganguza, along with special guest co-host and favorite co-hosting podcaster, Laya Hoffman.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks, Ann. Yes, it's great to be back. I'm glad to be talking about our second love on the mic.
There you
podcasting.
go. Podcasting. Yeah. I love podcasting. I remember when I started the VO Boss podcast, people say, why did you start that? And I'm like, well, because I always wanted to I didn't know how to do it and I wanted to know how to do it. And I just had a love for sharing my stuff. That's always been a part of my personality. I think that's why I was in education for so long. I mean, before that, I was in the corporate world. And I remember I would get so excited about things. And I'd be like, oh my God, this is the most amazing product. And I ran around my little corporate fellow friends and they weren't so happy to share their stuff. It was kind of like, no, this is my position. This is what I do. I am saving it for just me and my boss so I get recognized. And I thought, that's so weird. It's so cool that we can share our ideas and knowledge, and that didn't work so well in the corporate world. But at least at the time.
Well, it suits you well. It sure does. It suits you well. And it is very cool now that podcasting has made such incredible headway in the industry at large in audio. And there are so many great resources out there, no matter your level of interest, whether it's voiceover or audio branding. We've got a lot of fellow VOs that run some incredible podcasts out there on all the different facets of voiceover specifically. I also have a podcast, as we've talked about before. It has nothing to do with voiceover, but is equally as fun,
right.
and started for different reasons. So
I think it's all about, so here's the cool thing is that, first of all, we're voiceover actors. We love to talk, right? So we love to talk, and I just love to talk about things that I love. And so thus is a podcast. So I love talking about the business of voiceover. And what better way to share that than through a podcast? So I love to talk because I'm a voice actor, and I love to talk about business and entrepreneurship and all the cool things. And I love to be able to connect with other inspiring people like yourself. And that to me is it's a total joy when we come in here to talk. And who wouldn't want that as part of their business? So let's talk about our podcasts. And I always recommend people to talk about their passions. I think that just makes the best podcast because it becomes something that if you're enthusiastic about it and you're passionate about it, it's kind of infectious in a good way.
Yeah, that's right. And we, as voice actors, we already have the chops on the mic, but more importantly, we also know how to run the software and the editing programs and kind of the tech side of podcasting, which is a huge learning curve for others that are outside of our industry. So we got a leg up in that way. And to your point, when it comes from the heart and it's something you love and you're passionate about, people gravitate towards that. And there's, a world of knowledge out there, a world of interest. And so no matter what it is you're passionate about, there's a podcast for it. And so I'm glad to add to that mix. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I've had people ask me well, what should I talk about? I'm like, well, no, talk about what you're passionate about and the people will follow. And I think it's overrated when you think about, who will listen to me, right? What if I only have one listener? Well, honestly, I do believe you'll have more than one listener for any topic that you might talk about, unless it's something crazy and offensive. But even then, you'll have people listening. Honestly, I don't think it's about how many listeners you're going to get. I think it's all about you putting out content that you're passionate about and that other people will find valuable. I truly believe there's a podcast for everyone, for every idea. And just because you're a voice actor doesn't mean you have to talk about voice acting. That's rule number one. As a matter of fact, you don't, right? You talk about something that you're passionate about and that you've got something. I always say, what are you passionate about? What are you knowledgeable about? Where are your skills? Talk about that. That's exactly what you do for your podcast. You're not talking about voiceover. And the byproduct is people get to hear your voice. So in reality, you kind of are.
Right. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up because I certainly considered that. And just to give our listeners some backstory, I have a podcast with my daughter who's 8 years old. It's called She Sounds Like Me. You can find it, of course, everywhere you consume podcasts, but we talk about monster topics made small for conscious kids and they're modern-minded grown-ups. So it fits perfectly with our theme, of course. And it's really because we were having big ideas in the home that I felt were applicable to other people in our same situation. She's 8 years old and she had some really big thoughts about things. And we've got these mics. And so having those conversations were coming naturally to both of us. And we were already comfortable on the mic, both being voice actors. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, if one day this lands a voiceover job for her or I, great. But the real nectar there was that I was creating an audio archive of important conversations that I was having with my daughter that, we could both nurture and enjoy for years to come and our family could enjoy. And since it's grown nearly 10,000 downloads this last year and we're heard all over the world. So it's kind of morphed into something different. And that's the cool thing about podcasting. You don't ever have to be committed to any one thing, one publishing date, one topic. It can change. It can morph into whatever your passions are as you create them, because there's no one-size-fits-all podcasting plan. It can be so versatile according to the creator. And that's one of the most beautiful things about it.
Well, the scrapbooker in me absolutely loves what you just said about you have an audio archive. Oh my God, that just hits my heart so beautifully. I just love that. And to me, it's a legacy, right?
Yeah,
so
it's very cool.
I think that any podcast, right? You're out there, you're talking about your passions. It is, in effect, almost leaving a legacy. I think that that's an important thing. One of my main missions was I love to teach and I love to share. I love sharing things that I'm passionate about. And I also wanted to learn how to podcast. And thus was the beginning of the VO Boss podcast over 4 years ago. My gosh, I'm going on 5 actually. And the one thing that I will say is that it is a passion of mine, but it is also a lot of work.
A labor of love.
A labor of love.
And boy, is it ever.
How many people ask, how do I make money from my podcast? And I'm here to say,
how do you make a podcast? Start there.
Well, maybe make the podcast first and then.
And make sure you love it first.
Yes.
And then.
Because it does cost money in reality. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say that the easiest thing I do is come in the booth and talk to you for 20, 30 minutes, right?
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
That's the easiest part of creating a podcast. The rest of it, there's a lot of things that need to happen. You need to, first of all, kind of have a mission and a purpose for your podcast and a passion, because you will definitely be relying on that passion to continue it and to keep it consistent. I want to say that most podcasts start and only create so many episodes and then they fizzle out. For me to be going on almost 5 years, number one, I'm congratulating myself because it was a commitment. That is a commitment, and it's something that I still love. And I revamped and revised and rebranded along the way. Yeah. And that, to me, was one of the hardest things. A couple of years ago, I almost gave it up. And so it was one of the hardest things to do. So I'm happy that I did that. But know that if you do start a podcast, it's important for you to remain consistent if you want to have any established listenership.
Yeah.
And congratulations, by the way, on your downloads. I know that that's like a milestone, and it
kind of is.
Yeah, something to be very proud of. And the fact that
you've
been able...
congrats on your 5 years,
Well,
Ann,
thank you. It's something to really celebrate, because to do this takes, obviously, as we said, some hard work, and it does take some resources, because it is taking up your time. Once you create, we're talking now. What happens next after this is I basically ship those files off to my podcast editor. Now, before I had one, I did it myself. And so that takes a lot of time to edit 30 minutes of audio where you're going to maybe take out like a cough or maybe a pickup, whatever that is, and to make it sound good, especially if you have multiple people involved, right? You have different mics, different levels, different room environments. You are so easy, actually, Laya, to edit, because we have the same mic and the same audio interface, so it's really super easy. But I have guests who are sitting in the middle of their echoey living room with maybe their headset on or a Blue Yeti. I'll get like echo and like it's crazy.
Oh, the quality is across the board, right?
Yeah. So the next thing is to make sure you have a good editor, right? And it's not just to edit and take out mouth clicks or coughs or pickups. It's about being able to tell a story, because a lot of times if you're doing a free form podcast, which I never script mine. Basically, it's just like, here's an idea.
Neither do I.
Let's just riff, right? Let's talk about it. You will have things like a cough or a sniffle or, oh, wait, pick up. I just stumbled over that word. So you have to have an editor, if you're not doing it yourself, that will help create the story for you. And I have gone through, I'm going to say 4 editors right now. The one I currently have, I absolutely love. Thank you, James. Love James DeWitt for helping me out with this podcast, because he knows how to produce a story and understands, okay, this is what's going to flow from this idea to the next. Just
and
literally
keep your listener engaged, right? So you can continue on with the train of thought that is sometimes hard to do when you have more of a conversational podcast like ours are, right?
Now, are you editing your own podcast with your daughter?
And I do it all myself. And I gotta tell you, as a full-time VO, as a full-time mom, as a podcaster, I think that was one of the things that I underestimated the most. And really want to go back on a thought I just had. It's very similar to starting your own voiceover business because the investment and the learning curve of all the different platforms, of all the different elements that need to go into uploading, creating, producing, publishing, and promoting a podcast are very similar to how you have to position yourself as a voice actor and as a professional business person or entrepreneur in general. So there's a lot to learn. It takes a lot more time than an effort and investment, both financially, emotionally, mentally, energetically, to create a podcast. I think that's one of the most underrated things about starting, because it's very easy to get excited and think, "Oh, it's going to be easy. I can edit.
It's true. We're prepared.
Thing.
We're prepared for that, but I don't think you're prepared for the time investment.
Oh my gosh,
reality,
I was not.
Yep. Yeah. That's it. You can do it cheaply and by yourself if you would like, which a lot of people will do. However, I think they find the sheer amount of work that it takes. So it's not just we sit in our studios, we're recording it, then there's the editing, right? And then, okay, now how are you going to distribute it, right? The next thing you have to have is an RSS server, right? A place where you can distribute it, because you're not going to be hosting it on your own computer. You have to, it's like a web host. You have to have a podcast host. So you have to have a feed. And so my feed happens to be Libsyn. I don't know what yours is, Laya.
I use Simplecast, and I found them to be pretty user-friendly as far as interfaces go. But yes, you are right. Running down the road here, it's like conceptualize, record, edit, then you've got to publish, right?
Yeah,
and so that's what we use. Again, going all like bootstraps here. I'm going to get to your level soon. I'm confident of it.
Is there a fee? There's a fee for Libsyn for me. I pay a certain fee per month.
Yep. So do I.
To do that. So that is an investment, guys, in your business. So there, you have to have a place that can host it. And then you have to learn that platform, which is not terribly difficult, I think, for most. However, if you want to utilize some of the capabilities, like Libsyn right now has been around for a long time, and there's a lot of capabilities. So if I upload a podcast episode on Libsyn, I can also do transcripts. I can also publish it to social media channels from there. They also have their own web kind of version of it. So I can have my VO Boss podcast hosted up on Libsyn as well. But there are also other places that you can publish to, not just the Libsyn feed. Most people right away want to do Apple Podcasts, right? So you want to distribute this on the channels where people listen to podcasts. And Apple Podcasts is one, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora. So all of these outlets, if you pick the host for the feed, a lot of times other applications will grab from that feed. And if they don't, you've got to set up a profile.
Right. And that was going to be my next point, is that you also have to apply to each of these outlets so that your podcast is heard where people are listening. Because the more people that are, it's a numbers game, just like everything, right? The more people that are listening, the higher your ratings would be, the more exposure it's going to get, et cetera. So you don't want to just pick an Apple podcast. Of course, that's where the market share is. You need to kind of spread it around and publish to as many outlets as you can. And all of that setup takes time, interest, investment. I don't believe there's a fee there on most of those podcast distribution sites. But it takes time to get your RSS feed and make sure to push it out. Yeah.
I was going to say, so do you also publish to YouTube? That's a whole nother thing that we have to do.
Ooh, Yes, we do. And I stopped this season just because it was overkill for me personally. I mentioned I do this all myself. It's literally a 14-step process each episode. Everything from editing to publishing to transcription services, scheduling, etc., and then getting it to my own website. And so there is a method I use through Headliner that will, once I create the image and a landing graphic,
that's how we do it too.
Yeah, we can sync the audiograms and then push it out to YouTube. But I hadn't seen the return on the effort, let's just say, quite yet. So I need to get there.
Yeah, it's tough because every platform has their own way of displaying your podcast. So typically there's a description for your podcast, and most of the platforms will take that description. And for me, I just revamped the website. And by the way, the website is a whole nother thing, right? I created a whole new domain for VO Boss. I created a website. That was an expense. I just revamped the website. I moved platforms, which was an incredible amount of work, thus a little bit of a cost to me, but I'm super, super happy with it. And so there's so many things. It really is like your own business. And
it takes on a life of its own, man. You're absolutely right.
And if you're going to publish on YouTube, then you have to worry about, okay, there's a description, but do you upload transcripts? And do you have to do it in the way that YouTube likes transcripts to be uploaded? Or do you want it to automatically transcribe? Or do you not want it to be transcribed? In the description of YouTube, you might want to put keywords in there because you want to get found. Otherwise, just publishing, I found from Headliner, just the episode, it's hard for people to search on YouTube. And then you've got to do your own, right, to find it unless you've got a good description in there. So there's so many things on every platform. What does it look like on every platform? I just went through all of that, seeing what the new layout looks like. You got to have artwork. That's important. And to have artwork for your podcast, it has to be a certain size. For the fact that most of the platforms are apps that pull it down, it's going to work with. So it just is a lot of things you have to think about. But if you have a good provider like Libsyn, it will help you to take care of a lot of that in that central place. And then my website pulls from that feed. Other places like Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, they all pull from that feed as well.
Very cool. I haven't gotten my website to do that. I published my website through Squarespace. I believe you do Wix.
Yep.
And so it's pretty manual and it's a bit of a laborious process. Going back a few steps, I process my audio through a free service called Ophonic, which was a huge godsend, a bit of a relief for me because as an audio junkie like you, I'm looking for darn near optimal audio. And so I've got to edit it myself, but then I throw it through Ophonic. It levels everything, creates some preset data, description, keywords, like you were saying. It attaches the artwork to the audio file, and then I'm able to, and actually kicks out a transcript as well. Then from there, I upload to Simplecast. From there, we still need to do a little bit of plug and play, but then again, schedule it into the website, into Squarespace, paste the transcriptions. There's so many layers to this. And then from there, how do you promote it, right? You've got to create like an audiogram graphic or push it out on social or buy some ads if that's your thing. And it really becomes this layered thing. And like you said, if you're not consistent, your listeners will start to fall off. They won't think that you're in it to win it, so why should they? And you really want to continue on with that momentum that you've worked so hard to build.
And it's that whole promotion. That's the next step, right? So promoting it on your social media channels everywhere. And that takes time, right? I mean, I literally have a team of people that work on this podcast of no less than, now I'm just saying, I have 2 people that work on social media and content. I have 1 person that works specifically on content. I have another editor and I have a transcriptionist. So I have no less than 5 people right now that help me, besides myself, that work, but paid people. So it's like, so somehow I've got to be able to fund this. And I still have probably the same issues that everybody does when they have a podcast. Well, how do I grow it? How do I get more downloads? And that becomes like almost an obsession where it's like, oh man, I have so many, because you want to have some sort of feedback. Sometimes it feels like you are just speaking out to the air. And it's because this is, people listen to it and it's not a live interactive feedback thing. Sometimes it's hard to know who's listening and what they have to say about it. So then you have to ask for testimonials. or you have to rely on people to give their thoughts. And sometimes you don't know who is listening. When are they listening? Are they listening every week? And so that becomes another segment of the whole podcast thing.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because to our listeners, the best thing that you can do for a podcaster or a fellow creator, whether they have a podcast or not, but specifically in podcasting, is subscribe to their podcast. It's a weighted numbers game. The next best thing that you can do is write a 5-star review. Those reviews have so much weight in the overall visibility of that particular show or podcast program.
They really
so
do.
if you really are a faithful listener, or if you've enjoyed a specific episode, be specific about it and put that in your wherever you're consuming your podcast, but specifically in Apple Podcasts. That really does help leverage that visibility for the creator. And so similarly to if you're loving somebody's message on social media and you want to give it a like, it's worth even more if you give it a comment or you give it a share. The same goes for the podcasts and helping those creators promote that podcast by sharing it, reviewing it, and subscribing. That goes a long way.
I love the feedback. The call to action for most podcasts
so key.
is leave us feedback. And Apple really kind of has the game here in terms of podcasts. They're the majority of the distribution of podcasts out there. All of the other platforms are kind of minimal in comparison. However, I believe that Spotify is kind of, I read something about Spotify really coming up in the ranks in terms of distribution of podcasts. So
makes sense.
So wherever you can leave feedback, whatever platform you're listening on, if you can. I have a lot of feedback. Anybody that knows me, I am always loving testimonials. So you can always, for anything, for Ann Ganguza, for my VO Peeps, for VO Boss, leave me a testimonial. I love you forever. You can leave testimonials on my website. You can leave a voice testimonial, which is interesting because voice actors that listen to podcasts, they don't always want to leave voice testimonials, but it always intrigues me. And it intrigues me that not more voice actors have podcasts because this is what we do. We're set up. Yeah. We're set up to have great audio. And so, I don't know. Why not?
After we just told them how much work it's going to take.
Well, that's true.
Probably like, I don't know about that.
But it's still something I'm doing like joyful. Close to, it's joyful, close to 5 years. And there were times when I was like definitely having growing pains, definitely going, oh my God, do I need to invest? It is one part of my business, again, that I invest money in. And do I see a return on investment? In a lot of ways, I'm going to say that having a podcast out there that people listen to where you're genuine and you're passionate and you're sharing, people will love it for the fact that you are sharing and generously with them. And there are lots of advantages to that. I've had people that, want to work with me after listening to the podcast because they feel like they've gotten to know me. There's just kind of one thing that is a good thing is that if you have faithful listeners or even just a listener, once in a while, they get to know you for you. And if that's what you are broadcasting out, which I think to have the most successful podcast, you do have to be yourself. And people, if they know you and like you, and they start to trust you, and then they want to work with you. And you become almost like a top of mind sort of thing. So in a lot of ways, it can help advertise your voiceover business without you even having to say that you're, like, hey, hire me. I'm a voice actor. So I've been hired many times from people who have heard me on the podcast only because they like me. It's not like they're like, oh my God, listen to Anne's voice. I must hire her but it becomes something that they know me, and people like to work with people that they know, like, and trust.
Right.
Rule
and
number
you feel
one.
familiar. Absolutely.
Marketing.
You feel familiar about making a connection with somebody.
Yep.
Also, you've given them a tip or a bit of information that they may find valuable. And so to be able to pay it forward, whether they hire you or write a review or leave a testimonial, is a beautiful give-take in this digital world that we are living in, right? And so I often tell Sila, who, lucky for her, she doesn't have to do the 14 steps to finish the podcast like Mom does. But, when she gets that feedback from other kids that are listening in other countries or fellow even friends of ours that, I'd see her at school and say, hey, I heard the latest episode. When's your next one? There's a bit of there's so much reward and feel-good vibes that are coming from that. It feels like she's put herself out there, and
Absolutely.
what she had to say resonated with someone, and it stuck, and that makes you feel good, especially if you are sharing positivity or knowledge or something that will benefit somebody else. And so as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, and it's a graceful give-take of content and information, and it still feels good to you, then the labor of love of the work and the investment does pay off in other ways. And that's why we keep doing it. I'm sure that's one of your reasons too.
Absolutely. It is a wonderful soul-feeding aspect to my business where I'm happy to make an investment because the return on my investment may not be evident immediately. However, time and time again, where I've had people that have commented to me that have said how it's affected them, how it's helped them, that is also, being an educator, it was always about my students and it was always about being able to motivate and inspire people. And the same thing really comes from a podcast. And I want to reiterate again, to bosses out there, don't think that you have to just talk about voiceover. Talk about whatever it is that you're passionate about. Maybe you fly model planes, right? Or maybe I have a woman who worked, she was an advocate, a patient advocate. And I think, gosh, there's so many wonderful things and helpful, resourceful podcasts out there that could happen if you talk about that. She's passionate about donating her time for people less fortunate. Just whatever you're passionate about, make a podcast. I really believe that, those resourceful things that tug at your heart and can help others, that is like almost better than any sort of financial reward, is that feeling that you've given and people have heard you and that they have gotten value out of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Anne. But let's talk about the financial side of it, because you did mention right at the top of the episode, people always ask, you have a podcast, how can I make money?
Yeah.
And there are ways to make money. You have to be very strategic. It doesn't happen for everyone.
Exactly.
But do you have a plan for that, or is there additional streams of income that help you create some funds to offset the cost of producing your podcast? I'd love to hear about it.
I do. Thank you for asking. But it was not something that was implemented right away because it took some time to implement these things that would help me to fund the podcast. Number one, people just want to go, well, can I get advertisers? Well, you can, but there's a lot of people who don't like to necessarily listen to podcasts with a lot of advertisements. That's number one. The next best thing that people think about, well, can I offer sponsorships? Absolutely, you can offer sponsorships. I think that's amazing. And I actually, on my website, you can sponsor the VO Boss podcast. I offer sponsorships within the actual VO Boss podcast, as well as promotional sponsorships where you can get a space on our website to have a banner ad, or you can be involved in our social media promotions where we can add a link to your site, or we can add a link to the mailers that go out, a link to the blog post. And I also have a new section that I'm really starting to promote now, which is called Links and Deals. So any of my podcast guests who come on with me, I'll ask them, hey, do you want to offer a deal to our listeners? And so that is kind of a good give and take. It has been very difficult I'm going to be honest, very difficult to sell sponsorships because you almost need a salesperson to go do that. Yeah. Because depending on your podcast and the content in your podcast, anybody that wants to sponsor it or advertise on your podcast, they want to know who is your audience.
They want your metrics, right?
Yep, they want your They want to know how many downloads a month you're getting, what is your reach, and those are statistics that sometimes they're hard to get, especially for me. I'm in I call it a smaller industry because I am dedicated to voiceover. If I did something broader, if I did something broader like entrepreneurship, which, everybody and their brother has a podcast on, but I'd have a broader reach. So you have to kind of have those things in place before people will consider a sponsorship, because they want to know if their investment is going to get a return. So that is another way to do that, to make money. The other thing, too, is I have a product. I have products built around the VO Boss brand. So I have the Boss Blast, which is a marketing blast, which we call the Boss Blast. That the money with that helps to fund the podcast. And it's also something that I can talk about during the podcast as well as a marketing product for voiceover talent. And I'll just tell you that, Boss Blasts are awesome. So you can absolutely check that out on our website.
I know, I'm going to try one.
That's
for
right.
sure. I can't wait to get my hand on a Boss Blast. My name in lights.
There you go.
One of these days. But yeah, I would agree that the monetization part has been interesting for us too. Of course, some podcasts out there have a Patreon.
Yep.
And that's where guests, the people that are just fans of yours, can choose to contribute on a weekly or monthly or annual basis, and maybe they get something in return. But again, that's you creating more content.
Sure.
They've got special access, or they receive some sort of merchandise. All of that becomes its own thing. We have not chose to monetize yet because of this exact reason. It takes a lot of effort.
It does.
It takes being able to provide very clear, concise metrics to whoever's going to buy in, wants to know what that value is. And while I'm in the parenting space, which is a very large category, it's also very saturated. Yeah. And we also have, it's my daughter and I, so I'm very particular as to who I would want to align with and what brands. It's not just anybody that would give us some money, So those are all things to take into consideration when thinking about, whether or not podcasting is a moneymaker for you. And also considering, just like in your voiceover business, how much you're willing to invest and what you feel like your end game is. Like, what will make it a success when you get to X? Will you then consider it flush? And so those are things to analyze before you get started down this very cool, creative, and exciting industry that is sometimes just a labor of love.
It absolutely is. I'm going to say, don't go into podcasting with the idea that you're going to make money from it, because too many people, in the beginning, it's hard. You've got to build into it. And again, I'm almost 5 years into it. The things that I've been able to create to help supplement, like my Boss Blast product. Also, I also have vocal products, and I do swag as well. So I'm aligning with some suppliers that can do t-shirts and mugs and hats. And so you can get all that on my shop, on the VO Boss shop. That helps to fund it. But it does take a while, because you've got to grow that podcast and grow the listenership and grow the people that are going to want to invest in that as well. So,
and one of the best things that can come out of it, though, is the community, right?
Yeah.
Like, how precious is this VO Boss community that you've created? I know I feel it, having just been a guest on a few episodes. I've felt embraced by your listeners and the bosses that are always listening and contributing and supporting your show. So creating that community can be one of the most rewarding parts. My community at She Sounds Like Me has been rewarding for both myself and Sila from a feedback perspective and just our social digital network. Yeah. And so if that does it for you, then it's definitely worth pursuing.
I agree completely. And that to me is just, it's being able to share, doing something that I love and making an investment. And I don't have to make money. I just want to be able to fund it. That's it. Yeah. And so for me, it works. I think a lot of you bosses out there, you can absolutely make podcasting work. Just know that it is a labor of love, and we're behind you all the way. I mean, we like to support each other. Let us know if you've got any if you've got ideas or a podcast that we can, help promote you guys. So let us know. All right. Big shout out to our sponsor that helps us make this all possible, to make this podcast possible. It's an amazing resource for myself and all of my guests who join me. I use IPDTL. I have used it for the past, probably 7 years of my life, and instrumental in helping me with this VO Boss podcast. Big thanks and shout out to IPDTL.com. You too can network and podcast like a boss by finding out more at IPDTL.com. You guys have an amazing week. Go out there, make some great podcast content, and let's hear about it. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Join us next week for another edition of VO Boss with your host, Ann Ganguza. And take your business to the next level. Sign up for our mailing list at voboss.com and receive exclusive content, industry revolutionizing tips and strategies, and new ways to rock your business like a boss. Redistribution with permission, coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.